Alright, so, hi. I thought I would record a tutorial on the way that I draw hands, because it's always good to have a frame of reference, and I like recording stuff. So, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pick a nice gray-ish color. None of these are gray. We'll just go with that. Yeah, we'll go with that. And we'll take the fill tool, unlock the background. So, today I will be sketching out the process of how I draw hands and kind of what I do and consider when I am drawing. So, hands are pretty scary for a lot of people, and they take a long time to understand. But basically, the hand can be broken down into 3 parts. So, let's go back to black. When you start with the hand basically has 3 different parts, and generally it will start with this square-ish shape. I say ish because the thumb, which will go right here, is placed differently than the other 4 fingers in the hand. So we're drawing a right hand here. Generally, you want this almost square, kind of pentagon-y shape. So we'll start with that. Pick a different brush. So this is the first part, is kind of the palm-ish area, the palm and the heel of the hand. And then generally what I like to do is I like to place the thumb first. So we're just kind of gonna extend this and scoot it outwards. So this would be, if the hand was facing towards us, this would be the ball of the thumb. But that would make it a left hand, which I will get to in a second. But you just kind of generally, each finger, each digit is made up out of 3 parts. So this would be the first part. And then we've got the second part. And the third part. So I'm actually going to move this down a little bit so we have room for the fingers. And then, like I said, there's 3 parts, so the third part will be the actual fingers. And everyone generally has the same shape of hand, same standard shape of hand, which is kind of about this shape, with the middle finger being the tallest and the index and ring fingers being the same height, and then the pinky finger being noticeably shorter than all the other fingers. So we're going to do the same thing that we did for the thumb. We're going to kind of section out our 3 little parts. You don't have to worry about them being exact in proportions just yet. It's more kind of so getting a feel for what the hand is going to look and feel like. And now the pinky does sit at a bit of an angle. If you will notice when you spread your fingers apart, the pinky does sit at an angle, so we're going to draw that. You can have the pinky going straight up and down like the rest of your fingers. However, generally it looks more relaxed if it is at an angle. So then we'll continue with our kind of little shapes. I like to do cylinders. Some people will just draw them as squares and fill in the rest of the details later. I like to do cylinders because, I mean, that's essentially what fingers are. You know, they're little cylinders stacked on top of each other. So go ahead and do that. And they are not all exactly the same width, so you will notice that with fingers, generally they do tend to get a little bit wider as you go down towards the palm. A lot of stylized media will have them being the same width, which is totally fine. This is just a general kind of explanation. So draw the tips of our fingers. Again, you could do these square, you could do these rounded. Generally, I like to do rounded. But it's up to you. We'll draw the pinky. There we go. And I'm actually noticing, now that I've drawn the rest of the fingers, the thumb is kind of large, so we're just going to shrink that down a little bit. Right there. Now, since this is the back of the hand that we're looking at, you might want to include fingernails. Generally, with fingernails, you want to be careful not to make them, too thick and deep. Otherwise, that will look weird, unless that's what you're going for. Because really the only thing that makes fingernails distinguishable is actually their color and their texture, rather than the outline that they provide on the hand. So this is just our general little hand shape. You can see all our forms. Now, if I were to ink this, I would probably go in and do another cleaner sketch on top of this, but just for the sake of explanation, this would be good. So, in addition to having this general shape of the hand, there's a couple important things that you want to have when you are sketching a hand. So I'm going to switch to a different brush. I'm going to draw a little bit of a cleaner profile, just so that it's easier to look at. As you can see, I'm still doing the same shapes. I'm just maybe not being as gentle with it. So these will be spread out a little bit more, with the pinky on the end at that angle. So just this is maybe someone with some wider, flatter hands. Which is a very important thing to consider when you're drawing, is what does this person do? Do they work with their hands? Are they an artist? Are they a pianist? Pianists tend to have very long fingers, whereas construction workers, from all the work that they do with their fingers, they tend to be a little bit more beat up, so maybe they'll have chipped nails or calluses or some cuts, but we're just going to draw a little sketch here. Alright, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create another layer, and then I'm going to bring this opacity down, just so that when I draw the details I'm explaining on top of the hand, it's a little bit easier to see. And I will switch to calligraphy pen. So every hand is made up of a specific set of bones. Well, not every hand, but generally most hands are made up of a specific set of bones. I'm not very good at drawing bones, so you're just going to get sticks for right now. So there's a stick there. There's a stick here. And there's a rounded stick here. And then if you pinch your hand, you'll be able to feel these. There's a stick here. Stick here. Stick here. And stick here. And then, actually I'm going to pull this opacity down just a little bit more so this is easier to see. Stick. Stick. So on and so forth until you've got the basic skeletal structure of a hand. Now each of these sticks are held together by tendons, but that's a little bit complex, and this is just a little basic tutorial, so we won't get that deep into it. But because we have these sticks, and then there's a whole bunch of connecting bones for the wrist down here, which is a whole other story, the basic skeletal structure of any hand will look like this. Even if you were to look at, say, a cat's paw or a dog's paw, you would still see this general skeletal structure and kind of layout. So because we have these bones, it's important when we're drawing that we acknowledge that they exist. So, for example, if you squeeze your hand into a fist, you will notice that these bones actually poke out at the top. So, generally, they will look like this on the back of the hand. Now, if you're drawing someone who maybe has very muscular or very plump hands, you won't have to worry about that because the bones will be covered. because the thumb is facing at a different angle than the rest of our hands, or the rest of our fingers, you do still have this little knuckle pattern, but it generally tends to be on the side and not very visible because the knuckle itself is actually right here. Whereas on a finger, it would be right here or right here. And again, generally there tend to be some little ridges at the hinge points because that's where your fingers bend when you open or close your hand. Another important thing to remember in relation to the folds is how the skin behaves on the hand. So the biggest one is there is a little squishy bit of flesh and muscle right here in between the thumb and the pointer finger. So that squishy bit allows the thumb to stop it from falling all the way down when you stick your thumb out. Generally, it just tends to look like this, and maybe an extra little fold of skin right there. Now, there's a similar thing with the rest of the fingers. Some people call it webbing. I generally tend to like that term because it reminds me of the penguins in the Arctic. But there is let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So we have the bones of the hand that are coming together right here. And this is where the skin stops. But there's a little pocket in here, and you can kind of feel it if you stick one finger in between two others. There's a little pocket of here that is just skin and webbing, which is really important for making a hand's position look natural. Because if we continue to sketch out the features, it allows the fingers to flow into the palm naturally. So we'll just sketch a couple more. And then generally with this kind of webbing, the middle finger will stick out the most. So it will extend this way and this way. And then the ring finger, it will kind of follow in a pattern. So it will extend this way. And then we got the pinky. Sometimes there's a little pinch right there. Again, it depends on how fat or skinny your person's hands are. But that's the basic structure of the hand. So let's do some maybe non-standard hand positions, because nobody just walks around with their fingers completely extended all the time. Generally, when a hand is relaxed, the fingers will naturally want to curl inwards. So it looks a bit like a Lego hand. So let's say if a hand was at someone's side, we'll draw that kind of palm shape. So when you are facing someone, their pointer finger will always be in the front, so it'll be at a bit of an angle. This is where that box shape really comes in handy. And then, so we know this part will be the thumb, so we'll draw a little bit of a palm. This is the first half of the thumb, second, third. And you never, unless it's by choice, you always kind of want to have a natural curve to the shape of the hand. There's a very good book called Constructive Anatomy by George Bridgman. It is an old book. It was published in the early 20th century, but it describes the hand as having a line of action and a line of inaction. So this would be our line of action, and this would be our line of inaction. One of these is much more curved, and one of these is much straighter. So then we'll do the same thing with our little cylinders. Generally, I tend to start with the pointer finger because it is the leading finger of the hand, but you can start with whatever finger you would like. Some people like to start with the pinky because it's on the defining edge. It's totally up to you. Kind of play around, see what works. This hand is a little bit wide, so we're going to shrink that down. Alright, so this is not the best example, but what we can see here is the general shape of the hand. Now, I put the thumb in front for a reason, but generally, the thumb will actually go. Let's see if I can erase this. behind the first finger. The thumb likes to sit kind of more adjacent to the palm. You can especially notice this in the fist. The thumb in the fist likes to squeeze down towards the palm instead of resting completely on top of the fingers. If I were working on a piece, I would probably refine these fingers a little bit more, maybe change some of the angles, pinch them to look better. But just having a rough sketch is really good for understanding the placements of things. So then here, again, I'm going to draw the little knuckles, which also kind of helps with the perspective and guiding the shape of the hand, because we know these all generally tend to want to point down towards the wrist, which you can see on very, very scrawny or skinny people. You will be able to see the bones in their hand. So let's leave that one behind, and I'm actually going to go back to this layer for this one. Fists. Fists are very difficult. A lot of the times they end up just looking like little like blobs, or they just look like boxes that someone has drawn lines through, very simple kind of. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's the style you're going for, but we're gonna expand upon that a little bit more. Get a bigger eraser. Alright, go back to our calligraphy pen. So generally with the fist, there is that box shape, so that is a great starting point, is to have that box. But then on top of that box, if you make a fist and you look at it, you will notice that there's still that same shape that we talked about here with the up and then the down. So we're gonna go up and then down. And again, this is all still just blocking, just figuring out the shapes before you put the details in. And with the fist, the thumb, a lot of people want to put the thumb directly underneath or tuck it underneath the fingers. You can tuck it underneath the fingers, however, that is not proper boxing technique. That will you will break either your fingers or your thumb if you do that, and we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is the thumb actually sits at a bit of an angle because, like I said earlier, it likes to rest under the palm. And then we can see this would be the last digit, so I'll just put a fingernail right there. And then you won't actually see all that much of the first bit of the thumb, because if you're looking at a fist straight on, it tends to be overshadowed by the rest of the hand. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of draw some lines that will represent the first kind of section. We'll make them square so it's a little bit easier to understand. The first section of the finger, because if you were to look at the fist from the side, you can see the other two, they kind of look like this, they're curled up underneath the first digit. Get my eraser out of here. There we go. So generally, again, still following that kind of webbing pattern, we're just gonna sketch out the different parts of the hand. Now with fists, I like to start with the middle knuckle, or the middle finger and the middle knuckle, because that is the most prominent. That is the top of our peak. So I'm gonna kind of draw like this. And another thing to notice is that when the fingers of the hand are bent, they're not just like this. They have a little bit of slope to them, because the actual bone is coming in and connecting with the other part of the bone. It's the metacarpals and phalanges, so that's where this kind of bent shape comes from. So we're just going to do that here. Again, kind of keeping the same webbing pattern, same shape. The difference in the size of the fingers is less notable with the fist. However, the pinky is still just a little bit smaller. So, do it like that. And then sometimes you can see the little squishy bits of the hand as you pinch the knuckles close. Just draw a little palm. And then, because they're made up out of bones, we're going to just draw a little peak. Just right here. Now, if you really want to get into it, a lot of times artists will exaggerate this peak. So you'll see knuckles that go way up and then way back down, indicating that the hand is probably either moving very fast or in a very stylized manner. So we've just kind of got our fist. Then, you can adjust these proportions to the size of your character's hands. And then you'd see the forearm behind, kind of indicating the perspective of like you're about to get your ass kicked. Alright, and then the last thing I want to talk about is kind of, I'm going to actually create a new file for this. Again, still fill in our background. Just makes it easier to look at. You don't necessarily have to do that. But it makes it a little bit easier to look at, and it doesn't contrast as much. So, the last thing I want to talk about is the movement of the fingers. So, we discussed our standard, open hand, sideways hand, closed hand, fist kind of thing. But the last thing I want to talk about is moving the fingers. So, this would be a great example for, finger guns or peace signs or, rock and roll, A-OK. So, the way the fingers move, so if we get our base sketch going here, is that generally the thumb can move independently of the other four fingers. So I'm going to do this as a hand facing us, so we'll be able to see the palm here. Another important thing when drawing the thumb is to always consider the palm as kind of the first bend, because this is where our wrist would be, and then there's the second bend of the second digit, and then the other bend of the last digit. Generally, the thumb can move independently. You can touch your thumb to all four fingers without having to move the other ones. The thumb does not go backwards nearly as far as the other fingers do, unless it's double jointed, which is a whole other story, but we're not going to focus on that right now. So generally, with a hand, the first finger will pull the second finger with it when it moves. The second finger will pull the third finger, and the third finger actually moves a lot more independently than the other two, and the pinky will always pull the third finger down because the tendons in between the third finger and the pinky are actually touching, so when one moves, it pulls the other with it. This can be trained. A lot of pianists will train their third finger and pinky to move independently of each other, but it takes a lot of work. So it's just generally something to consider. So I'll move this down again. Alright, so let's say we're doing a peace sign. We'll draw the first two digits, just kind of by themselves. Some people do wider peace signs. If you were to do that, you would just move each digit over a little bit more, and this space would be bigger. We're not going to do that. We're just do standard, 2 drinks, please. So just draw those. Nice and simple. Nothing too fancy. Do make sure that the middle finger is taller than the pointer finger. And then, because these two fingers will be bent, we actually will not see a lot of the first digit. So I'm going to jump straight into drawing the second digit. And this is pulling this way, so like this. Draw pinky. Now generally, especially if the character has big hands, You can draw the first digit simply just by kind of outlining the curve of the second digit. So right here, just outline that curve. And then because the third digit with the fingernail is kind of tucked under, you can just draw a little circle on the side or underneath, and that should be sufficient. Because we're bending our pinky, we're going to have some squishes in the skin. And then because our fingers are curled and we're kind of pinching into the shape of the hand, this skin is actually going to want to move towards the first finger. And then we've got our little gap right here. And then, like I said earlier, this kind of squishy, fatty area, it's just going to have a couple wrinkles to it. Now, this is a very basic sketch. Again, if I were to ink this, I would probably go over with another more refined sketch, maybe add in the fingernails, fix up the proportions, but it's always good to get a general shape of what you want to draw before going straight into the details. Because if you try to go straight into the details, you may notice, like, oh, I made this thumb too big, but I'm way too far in to compensate for that, so it's just going to have to be big, and it's going to look kind of awkward. And then for finger guns, it's fairly simple since we're only extending the one finger. Let's see, we've got our pentagon-ish square. Our thumb will stick straight up. I'll do kind of maybe a more slender, skinnier hand. And then we'll just draw the first digit. It's going to hit the edge of the page, but that's okay. Again, kind of this gradual shape to it. And then, just like we did here, we're going to draw the second digit first. And then we're going to draw just the very top of the first digit, to give it, not only to give it more perspective, but to give it a little bit more of a human feel. And then we can draw our little half circles in here. Yep, it's fairly simple. Got the squishy edge of the palm. And then again, because we're bending our fingers, you want a little bit of a wrinkle right there. This separation of the palm. Boom, we got someone giving finger guns. Now this finger is a little bit long again. It's all about your style and proportions. Some people like to draw really big hands. Some people like to draw really small hands. Some people just like to do the little circle with the two lines and consider that a hand. That's totally cool. But it's all just a matter of perspective and style and figuring out what works for you. The best thing you can do is to study not only references of your favorite artists, but real life references. You know, take pictures of your hands and try to draw them as you see them in the picture. Once you've got that down, the kind of general quote-unquote realistic shape, then you can start to stylize it a little bit more. As you can see, you know, this first digit is a bit bigger, so we're just gonna keep rolling with that. Very angular, kind of comic booky type style. We could actually probably even do the same thing here. Lots of angles, lots of points. It's a nice thing about doing it stylized is you can get away with a lot more than you could in realism. But that's getting into a little bit too much for right now. But, you know, just keep practicing, studying. Find an artist you really like and try to recreate their work. Don't trace it, but just try to recreate it, see how it would fit into your own style. And, you know, have fun with it.